The following program is paid for and presented by John DeMasi. The opinions expressed are not those of Townsquare Media or station advertisers.
WPG Talk Radio 95.5 presents Talk with a Purpose. Join the conversation by calling 609-407-1450. Now the host of Talk with a Purpose, John DeMasi.
Well, John DeMasi's away for a while, and this is Seth Grossman, a frequent caller of the program, guest hosting the full 3 hours. So everything's going to be pretty much the same, except I'm going to double up the monologue. I'm going to do what I thought John would say for his first 10 minutes of the monologue from 9 o'clock to about 10 after. Then I'll do my liberty and prosperity talking points until the 9:30 hour, and then I'll open it up for phone calls and just do the program the same as it's done every week when I go to the liberty and prosperity meetings. So the phone lines are still 609-407-1450, but I won't be taking calls until the after the 9:30 break. And there's so much going on right now. Even though I, as the executive director of libertyandprosperity.com, am here at the studio for the full 3 hours, there will be a regular meeting or breakfast discussion at the regular place from 9:30 to 10:30 on Saturday at the banquet room of Sal's Coal-Fired Pizza. And don't let the name fool you. They make a great breakfast. But they're at 501 New Road in Somers Point, New Jersey. That's Route 9 and Groveland Avenue. And something else happening Saturday morning at 9:30 also. The opponents of offshore wind will be gathering in the park in Ocean City at 9th Street and Asbury Avenue, and then they'll be walking across the bridge to increase public awareness of just how awful those offshore wind turbines would be if we let them get built from so many different angles. And I'll be talking about that. And I'll also be talking about a little-known lawsuit that was brought by Governor Murphy's Attorney General Plotkin earlier this week, which is basically suing all of the major oil companies, Exxon, Shell, BP, Conoco, Phillips, and also the Petroleum Association, and suing them and requesting damages because those companies have dared to tell the truth about how fake climate change and green energy are. And that lawsuit is hurting us two ways. Actually, it's hurting me three ways. It's forcing us to pay more money for gas, oil, and the energy that we need by forcing the suppliers of that vital energy to waste hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on these stupid lawsuits. It's also hurting me as a shareholder of Exxon by making my stock go down. And, of course, it's raising New Jersey taxes. They're talking about raising the state sales tax now to pay for this nonsense. So we'll talk about that. If it sounds like I have a bit of a cold, in a way that's related to climate change because we're told the planet is burning up. But meanwhile, I happen to live in one of those old-fashioned big high-rises in Atlantic City where they have to turn the heating system off in May in order to turn the air conditioning on. So if you get a cold stretch, there's no heat in the building. I know there's several high-rises like that, so it's been pretty darn cold the last couple of weeks, and I'm probably feeling the effects of it. So we have that climate news. Also, of course, this is Memorial Day weekend. We think of Memorial Day, and I'd like to share some thoughts. And, of course, we often make a big mistake between Memorial and Veterans Day. Memorial Day, this Monday, of course, is the holiday to remember those who died fighting to keep this country and much of the world free. Veterans Day in November is designed to honor the veterans who returned safely, although sometimes with horrible injuries, and to thank the living. But in any case, if we have a chance, I'd like to think of my dad, Dr. Eli Grossman, who was not a hero in any sense, just one of the ordinary Americans who did their part to serve in the World War II and in Korea. And, of course, I'd like to touch on our local hero, Bernie Friedenberg, who grew up in Atlantic City, graduate of Atlantic City High School, and who was a much decorated medic during World War II. And there'll be a monument dedicated to him in a couple of weeks. And I'd like to discuss the two stories. One about Bernie Friedenberg, the hero, and second, whether it's a good idea to use taxpayer money to build monuments, expensive monuments, if ordinary citizens are not willing to donate the money to do that. Interesting question. Of course, I like to talk about Israel and Palestine. A lot of that's been in the news, and it's interesting that we have Norway, Ireland, and Spain calling for a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. And when I think about it, we've tried the two-state solution before, like in Vietnam. Remember that? We said that the communists could have North Vietnam, and the Catholics and the non-communists could have South Vietnam, and everybody would each enjoy their own life and their own state. Now, how did that work out? It only took 5 years before the communists decided they wanted it all and started a 14-year war to get it all. And, of course, it's always selective when you have two-state solutions. South Africa, you had the whites of South Africa were totally incompatible in their culture with the blacks of South Africa. But nobody said there should be a two-state solution there. No, the whites had to be a minority in a country and basically have their whole way of life destroyed. So why is it one set of rules for Vietnam and one set of rules for Israel and the Arabs in Palestine, and a different set of rules for, say, South Africa or even between China and Taiwan? Interesting stuff to talk about. So let me go into a little bit of detail. Going to the climate. There are two issues here. Number one, the fact that if there is any climate change, it's very, very slight climate change, or at least slight climate change caused by anything humans are doing. When you think about it, the Earth has been getting warmer now for the past 15,000 years. I remember when I was in elementary school, I learned a whole lot about the Ice Age and how the Ice Age came to an end. If you go up to North Jersey, you could see those giant boulders that were moved hundreds of miles by these huge ice sheets. You will find out that the beaches of Atlantic City were formed by these giant ice sheets grinding rocks into the sand that we enjoy in our New Jersey beaches. So what exactly caused the Earth to become warmer 10 to 15,000 years ago and caused the giant ice sheets to melt? And what caused those giant ice sheets to be caused in the first place? Well, of course, it was climate change. And I don't think anyone is claiming that climate change was triggered by a bunch of cavemen having barbecues in front of their caves. So obviously there are other forces going on. And you'll notice how the media is being used to manipulate you into thinking there's all this dramatic climate change going on. Because what's the big climate story for those of us living in New Jersey and much of the Northeast? It's that it's been pretty darn cold here for the past 3-4 weeks. But yet, if you turn on the national news, you won't see a word about how unusually cold it's been here. But you do see stories of the tornadoes in the Midwest. And just listening to the top of the hour news, that hyperbolic language, explosive weather conditions and storms, all designed to make you think that tornadoes in the Midwest at this time of year are not as common as they were when Judy Garland sang Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz back in the 1930s. So it's all designed to hype you up. And assuming that there is climate change, that is caused by humans, it's something that could be fixed with just a little bit of fine tuning. And Michael Schellenberg, author of Apocalypse Never, explained all that in his book, and he also explained it when he spoke in Ocean City a couple of times to explain how just simple transfer to nuclear power could eliminate almost all of our carbon dioxide that we're putting into the air, although there's a lot of doubt as to whether carbon dioxide has any effect on temperature. But assuming it did, all we have to do is reopen the Oyster Creek nuclear plant in Lacey Township that safely operated for, I guess, 50 years. And we could also double the capacity of the nuclear plant in Salem without expanding the boundaries of that power plant in any way. All could be done very safely without changing at a much less cost, without the ocean wind turbines and any of that stuff. And speaking of the absolute waste of the so-called solar and wind energy, I drove up to Trenton on Wednesday, and on Route 206. And if you drive up there, you see the most ridiculous display of solar, projects. You'll see, solar panels on telephone poles all along Route 206, with bird droppings on them, telephone poles hidden behind trees in the shade. And I guarantee you that there has not been any public information released about how much energy was produced from those worthless projects, and as opposed to how much cost they did. So it's two things driving the solar energy and two things driving the wind energy, and it's all basically money laundering. It's make pretend, it's a scam, and unless we stand up to stop it, it's going to continue until it breaks the back of our economy. By the way, I get a lot of criticism from a couple of listeners who keep emailing John DeMasi, and he forwards their emails to me, saying, how can I possibly say that solar panels and wind turbines don't produce energy? They obviously produce energy. Yes, they do. But they don't produce useful energy. And to be useful energy, it has to be energy that is produced when you need it. It's almost like if someone says, I have a brilliant way to produce ice cream, but I can only produce it in December and January and February. Well, what good would it be? Because hardly anybody wants the product when it's not needed. And I just thought of a brilliant idea. Why not, instead of having solar panels and wind turbines, why don't we use all that money to build lightning rods? Because I just looked it up. Did you know that one bolt of lightning contains more than 1 billion volts, enough to power 850,000 homes for an entire day? So why don't we start building lightning rods to capture all that wonderful lightning energy? And of course, the short answer is because you don't know when the lightning's going to come. You don't know where it's going to come. And when it comes, nobody could use 1 billion volts in an instant second, and there's no way to store it. So if you believe that solar panels and wind turbines are useful, then think about the problem with lightning rods. Because you see, solar panels and wind turbines and lightning rods all have the exact same scientific problems, but it's a shame we don't teach science in our schools anymore. Because if we had real science projects where high school students and college students would build a solar panel and see if they could even produce enough energy from their solar panels to thaw out a frozen pizza. let them learn for themselves. But you'll notice that the high school teachers and college professors don't want anyone to learn. We could hook up those 5 wind turbines in Atlantic City. They say, oh, these could power 20,000 homes. Oh, yeah? Well, could they power a single home? Why not do an experiment? Why not hook up those 5 wind turbines to the dormitories and classrooms of Stockton University and see how well they power up the university? And then the students would learn the truth. But see, we don't want students to learn the truth these days, just the politically correct truth. It's Memorial Day weekend, and I'd like to take a few moments to think of the veterans who or those who died to keep our freedom. And I just want to bring up a personal item involving my dad, Eli Grossman, dentist in Atlantic City for many years. He started World War II as a weatherman for the Army Air Corps. And it's important to remember that America went to war in 1941 for 2 reasons. Of course, we all know why we went to war against Japan. We went to war against Japan because they attacked us at Pearl Harbor and killed 2,500 Americans on a Sunday morning. But why did they attack America? Well, they attacked America because for about 5 years, the Japanese had been conducting a horrible Holocaust in China. Most Americans know that about 200,000 Japanese civilians were killed by the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But very few Americans know that in 1937 and 1938, in just one city alone, the city of Nanking in China, the Japanese soldiers murdered about 600,000 to 700,000 Chinese men, women, and children over a 2-month period with bullets and bayonets. And it was that massacre was so outrageous that even the Nazi German officials who were there were outraged by it. And because America said we would stop selling tin and oil to Japan until they stopped murdering the Chinese people, that is why the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor. But few Americans know that, and few Americans also know why we went to war against Nazi Germany. A lot of folks think, America went to war against Nazi Germany to protect the Jews. No. Why did America go to war against Nazi Germany? Well, 4 days after the Japanese attacked us in Pearl Harbor, we were not at war with Germany. We were just at war with Japan. The English and the Russians had their war against Germany. We had our war against Japan. But on December 11th, 1941, 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Hitler gave a speech to his National Assembly, the Reichstag, and he declared war on the United States. So we never declared war on Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany declared war on us. And that's why we went to war. And my dad joined what was then the Army Air Corps as a weatherman. And then this is interesting. I always wondered why my dad became a dentist in 1947 and finished dental school in 1947. I said, Dad, the war didn't come to an end until 1945, so how did you get to dental school and finish it in 1947? Well, you see, in 1944, every American, from the president to the top brass, absolutely was convinced the war would last for another 10 years. In fact, as a kid, my dad would do the Army cadence with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. You won't get home to the end of the war in 1954. They were all knew that because everybody knew the Japanese would never surrender, and the war was going badly in Europe as well. So the Army began a training program to train engineers, doctors, dentists, and other essential professionals to prepare for 10 more years of war. And it was only because of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki that the war came to an end in 1945. So my dad was lucky. He got to be a dentist, and he got and the war ended before he even finished dental school. But part of the deal was being in the ready reserves for 10 years. So as soon as the Korean War started, my dad was called up within 2 weeks. But it's interesting. My dad always said he was lucky. And he said he never wanted any special recognition or benefits for being a veteran. He said those benefits and that recognition, in my dad's words, were for the guys who got hurt, who got crippled, or who didn't come back. He said, I went to the service. I ended up with a free country. That's enough for me. By the way, we have a true local hero, Bernie Friedenberg. He was the same age as my dad, born in 1920, grew up in Atlantic City, graduate of Atlantic City High School. When war broke out, he did everything he could to enlist in the Army and the Navy and the Marines, but he had such bad eyesight that he was rejected by all of them. But he kept applying until he was finally taken by the Army as a medic. Bernie Friedenberg saved many lives as a medic in Omaha Beach during D-Day and during the Battle of the Bulge. Came back to Atlantic City with 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars, a Bronze Star, and honored from the French government. Of course, I knew that Bernie Friedenberg was active in the Jewish war veterans, but I knew him mostly as just an ordinary Atlantic City businessman. He owned the Monarch Bar in Atlantic City for a while, then the Fiesta Motel, and before he retired, he owned the Skillo game at Kentucky Avenue and the Boardwalk. So he died in 2018 at age 96. And a few years later, some leading veterans, including Jim Eberwein of Absecon, Doug Satterfield, Marco Polo Migliani, and Bob Turkavich of Brigantine, decided to form a committee to build a monument to him and the other World War II veterans. And now, 3 years later, that statue is built and it's ready to be dedicated on June 6th, D-Day, 2 weeks from now. But here's what's troubling about that project. When the original plan was to build this monument with $250,000 from private donations, and after a year, the committee raised about $30,000. They were short $220,000. Now that the project is being dedicated, we find out that instead of coming from private donations, $175,000 is being given by the CRDA, which is supposed to go to development to create jobs. Another $350,000 was given by Atlantic City Mayor Marty Small from federal funds that were supposed to go for coronavirus relief. And who knows where the other $430,000 come from, and how did the project costs go from $250,000 to $1 million? And normally when you have these so-called worthy charities, you'll find out that the money comes from big monopoly companies like the gas company, the electric company, like Atlanticare, like the Atlantic County Utilities Authority, Comcast, and Verizon, which are all these big monopolies that just raise the rates whenever they feel like it, and we have no choice because they're basically agents of the government. So I have no problem with statues being built like the Columbus statue in Atlantic City. I remember going to dozens of spaghetti dinners as a kid for private people in the Italian-American community to build a statue for Columbus. That's how monuments are supposed to be built. When you have taxpayers being forced to pay for monuments, and which monuments are worthy and which monuments are not worthy, that's a road that is really taking us to government control and socialism and is the opposite of liberty. Anyway, this is the combined Seth Grossman of LibertyandProsperity.com monologue and the John DeMasi monologue. We're now going to take a break and open it up to you, the listeners. Phone lines are open, 609-407-1450. Stand by.
The finest fresh fruit and produce you'll find anywhere? Check. Award-winning gift baskets and fruit baskets? Check. Baked goods and prepared foods? Check. They check all the boxes. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield. And that's not all. Gourmet items, specialty foods, and catering for all occasions. It's all right there. Check them out online at bfmazzio.com. That's bfmazzio.com. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield.
If you're interested in driving one of the finest automobiles on the market today, then you'll want to check out all of the fabulous new and pre-owned Lexus at Lexus of Atlantic City. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Driving a Lexus is like no other vehicle on the market. Test drive one for yourself at Lexus of Atlantic City. Whether it's new or pre-owned, you'll be more than satisfied. In fact, Lexus is consistently number one when it comes to customer satisfaction. Visit Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Or you can check out their outstanding selection of new, pre-owned, and L-certified pre-owned vehicles on their website, LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. That's LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. Or, if you want more information, call 609-641-0008. Lexus of Atlantic City, now celebrating their 26th year in the area. A dealership that you'll enjoy. No pressure, no gimmicks, no hassle, no hype. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. And remember, always online at LexusOfAtlanticCity.com.
This is Seth Grossman sitting in for John DeMasi for the full 3 hours of the program from 9 this morning until noon. The phone lines are open, 609-407-1450. Before I get to Andy and Brigantine, I just want to remind everyone that even though I'm in the studio for Saturday morning, Liberty and Prosperity is meeting as scheduled for breakfast discussion at Sal's Cafe in Summers Point, where we have others leading the discussion, including Brian Fitzherbert, a vice president, also with the Young Republicans. We have Paul Klepacki and Steve Jones with the John Birch Society. We have Rosemary Martelli representing the folks from the Little Egg Harbor Township, Tuckahoe area, and Dave Goloff from Atlantic City. So it's always a lively, spirited, and informative discussion, whether I'm there or not. In fact, some folks think it's better when I'm not there because they could get a word in edgewise. Also, for those you have who are dealing with the new road diets in Atlantic City and Margate and Longport and Ocean City and Wildwood, where just to assert their power and to make it more difficult for Americans to be free to drive where they want, the federal and state governments are forcing towns to take their main streets and change them from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction. And you didn't notice it too much during the winter at the shore towns, but boy, I noticed it yesterday, and it's absolutely awful and disgusting. And also the school board elections. If you want to know more about the school board elections, I put the speech and seminar actually that I delivered to the New Life Assembly Church in Egg Harbor Township on May 13th. The whole speech is posted online, and also with the written materials at libertyandprosperity.com. And if you're thinking about making changes to your public schools, please remember that the deadline for filing your petition is July 29th, the last Monday in July. But if you want to be a serious candidate and make serious change, you don't want to wait till the last minute and just get a bare minimum of 10 signatures on your petition. You want to start preparing now. So feel free to go to our libertyandprosperity.com website and look up those important details. All right. Andy of Brigantine, welcome to the program. You're on the air.
Good morning, Seth. It's a great day in the city of Brigantine, and we're about to have our first summer with the 25-foot wide bicycle lanes that you could drive a tractor trailer through.
You mean they have the road diet in Brigantine as well?
Oh yeah, yeah.
My God.
And like I said, this is our first summer, and it's like, were they actually forced to do it, or was it one of those deals where, well, we'll pay for it if you do it, or we'll take away money if you don't? Was it one of those deals?
Well, it's a combination. It's where, first of all, we will create so many rules that building your own roads is so expensive you can't afford to do it without raising taxes a whole lot. But don't worry, we will print out, with our $33 trillion deficit, we will print out all this federal money, and we will give you money to fix your roads, but only if you do exactly what we tell you to do. And we think you ought to have. And by the way, one thing that you'll notice, they say we're doing this for the environment, we're doing this to make things safer. But what you have all these unintended consequences by having these long traffic jams, where you never had traffic jams before. Drivers are getting frustrated. They're getting impatient. Pedestrians think they could cross the street whenever they want to. And the irony of it is, even though they say this is done to increase pedestrian safety, you have more pedestrians getting killed and injured by motor vehicles since they did these programs than before. And it makes sense, but the government does this stuff anyway. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And let's remember, cars are now sitting in stopped position with the cars idling bumper to bumper, which all these exhaust fumes build up. And I wonder how good that is for the climate change people.
Well, the whole idea is the left, the communists, the socialists, the woke, whatever you want to call them, they hate cars. Not because of the environment, but because they allow Americans to travel where they want and when they want, and they can't be controlled, and they want to have a situation where we're all riding bicycles, living in little cubicles on top of our workplaces, just like in communist China. That's the ultimate goal, and it's obvious.
That's exactly right, and if people don't believe that the whole goal here is for the government to control your movement, just think about what they did during COVID. But that's not why I called.
Go ahead.
So you were talking about the windmills. You started out with that. And I wanted to talk about who is telling us about the green thing and about that we're destroying the environment and climate change. You know the old legal term, falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus, correct?
Yeah, if you lie about one thing, you're probably lying about everything. It comes up, it's mentioned by the judge at the end of every trial, every jury trial. Very good.
Okay, so the same people who tell us that man is changing the climate, also are telling us that the economy is great. We just don't know it. They're telling us that if you took the vaccine, you wouldn't get COVID. They told us that the protests were peaceful. They told us that the laptop was fake. They told us that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians when it was actually Hillary Clinton. So the same people are telling us about climate change, told us all of these other lies, falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus.
And by the way, you left out a very important big lie that Governor Murphy is relying on, the idea that women are paid less than men for doing the same work. And Rush Limbaugh even pointed this out for many years. That you'll see these surveys are taken, they'll ask women, and most women believe that women are paid less than men for doing the same work. But yet, when asked in the identical poll, when they asked the same women, are women in your company where you work getting paid less than men for doing the same work? And it was like 80% said no. So how can you possibly have women saying most women are not making the same as men for the same work in general, when most of those same women saying it's not happening at their own companies? But you see the effect of the lies and the propaganda on the politics.
Well, do you know how they reach that number, Seth, that lie? They take the sum total of all the income earned by all the women who are working in this country, and they compare that to the sum total of all the dollars earned by all of the working men in this country. And when you do it that way, yes, the men earned more. But why is that? Well, women don't usually work walking on girders on skyscrapers. Women don't do the dangerous jobs that generally pay more money. Women tend to be school teachers and things that are safer. Women don't work 50 years like men do all the way through. Women take time off for child care and caring for their elderly parents and this and that.
Right, Andy, it's a voluntary choice. My daughter is doing the same way. When she had her kids, she took off 3 or 4 years to be with the kids when they're young, and so she didn't climb up the career ladder when she was doing that, but she is so much happier raising her own kids, and she tells us that, and she tells me how miserable her single friends are who did not make that decision. So when you use these statistics to make a political agenda, it's really ignoring the truth. All right, Andy, thank you so much for the call. Any other points you want to bring up before I think we have to take a break in a few minutes?
No, that's okay. But so your daughter, I would say to your daughter, Harris Butker, line 1. He's on line 1.
Absolutely. All right, Andy, have a great weekend. Thanks so much for calling in.
No break.
Okay, shall we take a break?
If you're interested in driving one of the finest automobiles on the market today, then you'll want to check out all of the fabulous new and pre-owned Lexus at Lexus of Atlantic City. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Driving a Lexus is like no other vehicle on the market. Test drive one for yourself at Lexus of Atlantic City. Whether it's new or pre-owned, you'll be more than satisfied. In fact, Lexus is consistently #1 when it comes to customer satisfaction. Visit Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Or you can check out their outstanding selection of new, pre-owned, and L-certified pre-owned vehicles on their website, LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. That's LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. Or, if you want more information, call 609-641-0008. Lexus of Atlantic City, now celebrating their 26th year in the area. A dealership that you'll enjoy. No pressure, no gimmicks, no hassle, no hype. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. And remember, always online at LexusOfAtlanticCity.com.
The finest fresh fruit and produce you'll find anywhere? Check. Award-winning gift baskets and fruit baskets? Check. Baked goods and prepared foods? Check. They check all the boxes. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield. And that's not all. Gourmet items, specialty foods, and catering for all occasions. It's all right there. Check them out online at bfmazzio.com. That's bfmazzio.com. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield.
Your WPG Talk Radio 95.5 AccuWeather forecast for South Jersey. For today, areas of morning fog, otherwise very warm with some sun giving way to some clouds with a high of 87. For tonight, low clouds with a low of 59. For tomorrow, times of clouds and sun with a high of 81. Tomorrow night, turning cloudy, low 63. On Monday, mostly cloudy, becoming humid in the afternoon with a gusty thunderstorm, high 75. I'm AccuWeather's Caitlin Lawrence at WPG Talk Radio 95.5.
This is Seth Grossman sitting in for John DeMasi, and it's open forum right now. We'll have John of Ocean City and Bob of Cape May coming on shortly, but before we do that, I have a wish list of about 26 topics I wish to get to. If I'm lucky, I'm going to get to maybe 7 or 8 of them. But if you want to see the other topics, they're actually posted at libertyandprosperity.com. Look at our homepage there. And what I've been doing for the past week, we actually post what I actually talk about on this Saturday morning program. But and you can listen to the audio and hear it. But I also post what I wish I said on the program after doing the research and coming up with the documents. So you can see both at libertyandprosperity.com. I hope you'll have a look at it. And I specifically hope you'll have a look at the school board elections. Very, very important. I want to commend Ethel Hermanow, a Brigantine realtor, but also a very active member of the Galloway Township School Board, who won election last year and is making very, very important progress on that school board. I hope she'll be calling in today at some point, but if not, she's the one who put together that seminar. It is posted on our libertyandprosperity.com site. It's 15 minutes before the hour. We don't have any breaks scheduled for the until the top of the hour, so we have John of Ocean City, Bob of Cape May. So if you're waiting for a good time to call, this is probably it. John of Ocean City, welcome to the program. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning. I have one topic, but first I'm going to bring up the topic that people would expect me to bring up, which I'm not going to talk about, which would be the dropping of a little boy and fat man in Hiroshima and Nagasaki circa August 1945. But no, what I want to bring up is my belief that George Washington, the first president of the United States, was the first assassinated president. They took out 40% of his blood. It was James Craig, Gustavus Brown, Elisha Cook. And he also poured copious amounts of mercury oxide down his throat. It's called calomel. Now, he did not have the lower... All right,
John, I don't have patience to go there because it's pretty well documented. George Washington had the misfortune, and by the way, this was after he had resigned as president, or after he decided not to run for a third term.
I understand that.
He was retired, and we know every detail about George Washington's death because he was such a celebrity and so best loved that he was treated by the finest doctors in America, including Dr. Benjamin Rush of Philadelphia. And what happened, and I'm just going to say it here, and then you could take it from there. But I'm going to give you pretty much the undisputed facts. So George Washington it was a snowy day. He was retired. He came down with a very bad cold, probably the flu. And probably had he just been left alone, I agree with you, he probably would have recovered from the flu. But because he was so beloved, when he fell sick, the finest doctors in America came to Virginia to take care of him. And they killed him. Why did they kill him? Because at that time, it was almost like the COVID vaccine. You know, trust the experts, trust the science. The science at that time believed that disease was caused by having bad blood. So if somebody was sick, you would remove the bad blood, and they would recover. So the finest doctors in America removed the bad blood, and George Washington got sicker. And because he got sicker, they said, "Oh, we didn't remove enough bad blood." So they removed the bad blood, and you're right, George Washington died probably of extreme blood loss because the doctors believed in a science that was totally wrong at the time. So the lesson should be that be skeptical of the science, that understand that the doctors aren't always right, the science isn't always right. That's the lesson I think should be learned from George Washington's death. But, go ahead. You have your view, and go ahead.
Okay. For one, he did not die. He did not have the lower respiratory disorder of pneumonia, and there's no probably about it. He was diagnosed with inflammatory quinsy, that's severe strep throat. Now, understand, bloodletting from a late 20th century, early 21st century viewpoint is barbaric. However, the father of medicine, Hippocrates, did practice bloodletting, but he believed in doing it sparingly. He believed dietary, what you put in, is more important than what you take out.
And John, I'm going to take the liberty as a host of all the stuff going on today. All the issues going on, I think there's other stuff that we really should be talking about to this limited time, this limited audience. But thank you very much for bringing up this point this week. That's John of Ocean City. Let's go to Bob of Cape May.
Good morning, Seth. I thought we'd continue with the obscure history lesson, but anyway, good move, Seth. Look, in Delaware, right, I have property in Rehoboth Beach. One reason the real estate taxes are about 1/20th of what they are in New Jersey, and the fact there's no real estate tax there is because voters do get involved in their school board elections. And give you an example here, the Cape Henlopen School District, which is Rehoboth Beach, they have a high school there they call the Taj Mahal, an incredible high school campus. In March, the district there wanted to get a referendum passed for a $40 million swimming pool. $40 million swimming pool. rejected by the voters. They went back for another bite of the apple because they wanted this last week, a $20 million administrative school building. Rejected again. So again, voters get involved in their local elections, in the school board elections and so forth. Your taxes will then reflect the fact that they'll be a lot lower. So that's not what I called about.
But let me just deal with that. It's interesting that one of the causes of property taxes to skyrocket in New Jersey during the past 30 or 40 years is ironically because during the past 30 or 40 years, New Jersey implemented a lot of state taxes to lower property taxes. Until 1965, we did not have a sales tax. We got our New Jersey sales tax specifically for property tax relief. Until 1976, New Jersey did not have an income tax. We passed an income tax precisely to go into a fund that is called the New Jersey Property Tax Relief Fund, which explains why when you get a refund of your state income tax, the refund check says Property Tax Relief Fund. Every dollar was supposed to go to property tax relief. But instead of lowering property taxes, the taxes went up. Why? Because the more money we put into the public schools, the higher salaries that the teachers were given and the administrators were given, and they used that money to raise the dues for the teachers union and the administrators union and the libraries union. And now those public employee unions are the most powerful political force in New Jersey. So ironically, in trying to cut property taxes, we created this evil machine, political machine, that gets whatever they want from government. And by the way, the other thing that's out there, which I think is important, is in New Jersey, every Democrat from Governor Murphy on down is in the pocket of the teachers union. So whenever there are school board elections, the full force of the Democratic Party, the governor, the senators, the local officials, all goes behind electing woke Democrats and borrow and spend Democrats to these school boards, whereas the Republicans are so afraid to take on the teachers union that they have this gentleman's agreement that even in towns like Moorgate, where the school board is appointed by Republican mayor, they will pick big spend, big woke, school board members, because the idea is, well, we Republicans, if we leave the schools alone, the Democrats and the schools will leave us alone, and it's a disaster. And we've got to get more active, like in Delaware, and that's why it's all posted on libertyandprosperity.com website. So I know it was your side issue, but I think it should be a main issue, and I'm glad you brought it up, Bob.
Oh, absolutely correct, Seth. The windmills that Governor Murphy is trying to shove down our throats. The reality about windmills, solar panels, it's an ineffective technology. It's not efficient, which you've made that point many, many times.
By the way, Bob, what did you think of my idea? If we're going to go into intermittent sources of electricity, where 95% of the power is wasted and it can't be stored, and we have to rely on backups anyway, why not put lightning rods out in the ocean? Because as I got the statistics, that one lightning bolt contains a billion volts of electricity, enough to power 850,000 homes for an entire day. So if you want to flush money down the toilet, why not try lightning rods?
Well, look, Seth, what we need to devote money to now. There's a fellow named Bjorn Lomborg. He's a Danish political scientist, but his main issue is climate change, and he's a really smart, intelligent guy. Climate change is real. A lot of it is man-made. However, our response to it is totally insane. It's hysterical what the big government response is to it. The main culprits for global warming are India, China, and the emerging African nations. Yet all the burden they want to place on U.S. taxpayers. That's one point. The other point is that right now...
Wait, before you go on, do you notice a very similarity between the accepted science on climate change and the accepted scientific or government response to the coronavirus pandemic. It's identical. They just made stuff up, and they paralyzed our entire economy, and now we know years later it was all for nothing. And that's exactly what's going to happen when we see these useless steel wrecks of wind turbines out in the ocean, and future civilizations will say, well, at least the pyramids of Egypt were pretty. These things are ugly.
But Seth, to your point about the lightning rods, yes, we need to spend money on research and development. You know, Lundberg makes a point in his article. In the 1950s and early 60s, Los Angeles was a mess in terms of air pollution. Total mess. What solved that problem? An inexpensive innovation called the catalytic converter. And, you look at car emissions now, Seth. I got an old Corvette from 1967. You don't want to be in my garage when I start that thing up. Okay, you'll choke to death from the fumes. Start my modern car up, my 2020 Toyota Highlander. I can stand in back of that car, and it's fresh air I'm breathing in. I can stand 2 feet from the tailpipe. Not that I want to, but it's innovation. American ingenuity and innovation will solve problems. It always does. And we just need. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if they say that the supply of fossil fuels is limited, well, obviously at some point we're going to run out, and at some point we're going to have to use, the nuclear fuel or other alternatives. And it's amazing how every time people had to do something, we did it. But when you make something artificial, where certain privileged people get to fly their jets all around the world, and ordinary middle-class people are told they have to have road diets and, have to sit in traffic jams that are so bad that people leave their cars home and end up not going to the beach at all. I mean, this is a political way to control people and manipulate people, has nothing to do with climate, has nothing to do with the planet.
And Seth, the most efficient way of producing energy, and energy is a key to human civilization, is right now it's fossil fuels. That's just the reality of it. And the Chinese people, the emerging African countries, and the Indians, they do not want to ride their bikes to work. That's just a reality. These people want the modern conveniences that we've had all throughout the decades.
And it just shows the arrogance of the liberals. They're saying, yeah, we already have our wealth, we have our riches, and we want the rest of the world to live in poverty, so we can enjoy what we have. And of course, they're not going to do that. Well, and we have to accept the fact they're not going to do that. And why should they do that?
Of course, and Seth, dare I say that should we accuse these liberal leftists of racist attitudes? Should I say that? They call us racist every time we open our mouths. So and again, this idea that our supply of fossil fuels in the 1970s and 80s, it was gospel reality. It was something called Hubbard's curve. Hubbard determined that we were going to run out of fossil fuels in about 40 or 50 years back then, and it was gospel. The oil companies believed it. The geologists all over the world believed it. But then what happened?
Necessity is the mother of invention, and Yankee ingenuity. All right, we've reached the top of the hour. Bob, thanks so much, Bob Kate May, and we will continue. Phone lines are open 609-407-1450. Seth Grossman's and libertyandprosperity.com sitting in for John DeMasi.
WPGG Atlantic City, WENJ HD3 Millville, a Town Square media station. Everything you need to know in 6 minutes starts now. WPG Talk Radio 95.5 presents Talk with a Purpose. Join the conversation by calling 609-407-1450. Now the host of Talk with a Purpose, John DeMasi.
Well, John DeMasi is in an undisclosed location today. This is Seth Grossman of libertyandprosperity.com sitting in for him. The phone lines are open, 609-407-1450 if you'd like to join the discussion. And by the way, with all due respect to Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor, didn't like what Donald Trump was saying, so he wanted an order to shut him up. Well, you see, that's not the way we determine the truth in America. Our tradition of determining truth in America is open discussions of people with different opinions. And as Benjamin Franklin often said, when different political views collide, sparks of truth fly out and political light is obtained. So listen to both sides. Try to understand what information the other person has that you don't have. Give information to the other side that person doesn't have. And when you know it, we all learn from each other, and that's how we get to the truth. That's been an American tradition since the days of Benjamin Franklin. And that's why he observed that Americans were more knowledgeable and had more common sense on more things than the elites of Europe who were trained in politics since childhood. And unfortunately, in our public schools, in our social media, in almost everything in America, we've lost that. So you could watch Fox News and not see any stories of vital importance that would challenge the political, position of Fox News. And then you could watch MSNBC or CNN or ABC News, and you'll see that they don't even mention any of the stories that Fox News thought was important. So you can't possibly have a national political conversation unless the entire country has access to the same facts. And by the way, Wednesday, I saw a good example of that. On Wednesday, I was driving up to Trenton, so I was listening to various stations from various areas. And I just remember that on all of the conservative stations, the top news, as it should have been, was the way that the congressional hearings showing how Dr. Fauci and the top officials of the Center for Disease Control and the National Health bureaucracy, how they had completely lied about everything during the coronavirus epidemic. They lied. They didn't say that the disease came from a Chinese laboratory, which was almost obvious at the time. They made up this rule that social distancing of being more than 6 feet apart would stop the spread of the disease. It turned out that the only reason they made up that phony rule was so they could close our public schools and comply with the demands of the powerful teachers union. So all that explosive testimony that was really should have been top news, I was listening to National Public Radio, and not one word of that news was mentioned on National Public Radio. Instead, the top story was the president of Kenya was visiting the White House, and that the Republican Speaker of the House they implied he was racist for not being present at the White House to meet the president of Kenya. So, not only different views of the same facts, but just not mentioning any facts at all that are vitally important to the country, and and that should be known by everybody. And by the way, we have a member of Liberty and Prosperity called Dr. David Goloff, actually put together a program called ReclaimTheNews.com that allows you to have access to 300 news sources, and it actually has a way of showing the top stories, so you could see right away which media is including important facts and which are excluding it. But that's just a side note. All right, since we don't have any calls right now at 609-407-1450, let's play a tape of an observation of the sexualizing of our children in the public schools. This is an interview given by Mike Slater, and I want to thank Ethel Hermanow of the Galloway Township Board of Education, who, of course, made that available as an individual, not on behalf of the board, because if anyone thought she did it on behalf of the board, they would bring false ethics charges against Ethel Hermanow. Just like in Ocean City, you had the Upper Township Teachers Mafia brought ethics charges against Robin Schaefer for daring to post a website or a Facebook page that allowed different points of view. By the way, they came up with these ethics charges against Robin Schaefer. He narrowly lost the election. And after the election was over, then I guess the State Board of Education said that Robin Schaefer did not do anything wrong. So that's called the lawfare being used to affect elections. But anyway, thank you, Ethel, for making this interview available. Let's play it now, and let's talk about it afterwards.
Now they won't even let you opt out. School district just north of D.C. They said, hey, we're going to have this LGBTQ plus curriculum for K through 5, but even pre-K and Head Start program. That's like 3-year-olds. Well, enough parents said, whoa, that's crazy. We want to opt out of that. And the school said, okay, fine, you can opt out. Well, so many parents opted out that the school district said, we're not going to let anyone opt out anymore. Now, they could have said, wow, this is very unpopular. We're going to stop this LGBTQ plus stuff for 3-year-olds. But they didn't. They said, we're not going to allow parents to opt out anymore. Well, enough parents sued. It went to the courts, and the courts came back and ruled in favor of the school. Books like this, where a little puppy gets lost at a pride parade, and you have to find the puppy, and that's how you learn your letters. So K is drag king, L is leather, Q is drag queen, U is underwear. 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds. So the court said that schools do not have to tell you, the parent, when they're giving your kids this content, and you, if you do find out about it, do not have a right to opt out. So just further evidence that these public schools, government schools, they do not believe that these are your kids, and I believe you should act accordingly.
Oh, that's Mike Slater giving an observation of how children as young as 3-year-old and 4-year-old are being taught that what is not normal and what is sometimes actually sick and perverted is actually normal and to be tolerated. And if you as a parent don't want your children to think that way, well, you're the problem. It's important to remember, by the way, our country was based on a government with the consent of the governed. And the professors at our colleges and the high school textbooks are giving the false impression that democracy is somehow consent of the governed. So if you have democracy and you have a vote and 60% of the people want one thing and 40% of the of people want something else, and the 40% are forced to do something they don't want to do, that may be democracy, but democracy can be tyranny. And democracy is definitely not government with the consent of the governed. What is consent is when you buy a product, and this is how our American government really started. If you want to have a loaf of bread, you could spend 5 hours baking your own loaf of bread, or you could go to a store and buy a loaf of bread that somebody else made. And then you give them the money because you'd rather have the bread than your money, and the people who bake the bread would rather have your money than the bread. And you say thank you and thank you when each of you gets what you want. That is a transaction with consent. And at one time, American government was basically based on consent. So if you had children, you could say, well, I could hire a tutor to take care of my children, or I could, have my church or civic group hire a couple of teachers to take care of our children, but I consent to have my taxes pay a little bit more or be a little bit more so my local government can hire a teacher to take care of my children. That's government by consent. But now we've gotten to the idea that the people you hire, the teachers, are actually raising your children, and they will not even tell you what they're teaching your children, and they actually tell your children not to tell your parents what you're doing. By the way, I actually had an example of that. I ran into someone in our group was a substitute teacher, and basically a couple of years ago at Mainland High School, you had a history teacher who had gone completely rogue. Instead of using the official textbook to teach American history, he had made copies of Howard Zinn's so-called People's American History, which was pure woke, pure communist, pure hate America, pure trashing everything good about America, and he was giving those materials out and telling his students, "Don't tell your parents what I'm teaching you." Anyway, let's go to Greg of Absecon. Greg, welcome to the program. You're on the air.
Grossman, good morning.
Good morning.
As citizens of the United States, or supposedly anyway, the pecking order is established right now. If they're coming across the border as visitors, they have now preferential treatment in relation to the citizens.
Yeah.
Is that unfair?
Well, yeah, we've basically hired. What's going on in America right now is an invasion. That the people running our country don't like the majority of people in our country. We're actually run by people who hate us, and we're not dying off fast enough. We boomers we're jogging, we're keeping in shape, we're eating right, so we're not dying off fast enough. So they just open up the door to have about 30 to 35 million people who have been raised to blame every problem in their life on Americans in general, but especially Christian, white, conservative Americans, and they are want to invade us just as any invading army did throughout history. And instead of keeping the invaders out, we have a government that is opening up the gates and letting them in and saying that we are unpatriotic if we don't want to be overrun by foreigners running our lives. So we really have this horrible situation, and I hope we somehow have a happy ending to it.
Well, it's going to get worse. And that's the perspective that we're left with. We have the United Nations that is now creating armies that will tell us what to do. We have organizations with vast amounts of money that are going to dictate how many we're going to be as far as human beings on the planet, what we eat, and what will be permitted to survive.
Yep.
It looms in our future.
Well, and by the way, the future is in Israel right now. I mean, just see that a country gets invaded.
No, that's true.
And right, and so a country's invaded, and 1,200 people of their 1,200 ordinary peaceful citizens are murdered, and women are raped and tortured and mutilated, and then the country's trying to defend itself, and the United Nations and the International Court is saying if you try to stop the people who want to kill you, you're a war criminal. I mean, how much more crazy could it get? Greg, thanks so much for the call. All right, let's go to Linda of Absecon. Linda, welcome to the program. We have this Absecon contingent here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you about Israel. How many Americans are hostage over there in Israel now?
Well, we don't know, because now that Israel finally went into Rafah and Israel was told, oh, you can't go into Rafah, it's going to be a disaster. So Israel went into Rafah. They evacuated 95% of people. There was no real problem, and now Israel is finding out that most of those hostages are dead.
All right, what are their names?
Well, I mean, I wish I knew. I don't have the paper in front of them.
How about one name?
Okay.
Does America know anything about her American hostages? I heard yesterday that ever since, the most I knew was around October 7th, and I think I heard something yesterday that we had five American hostages, and I'm saying to my husband, well, who are they? Why don't we know their names and their families?
Well,
and why aren't they appearing on television? And why isn't there this outrage? We have American hostages.
Well, actually, isn't the reason the same as everybody knows George Floyd's name, right? Black man who died of a drug overdose in Minnesota, right? Everybody knows his name. Who was the Galloway Township man who was murdered in Pleasantville? Who were the two people who were murdered at the linen shop in Philadelphia 3 days ago? Who was what was the name of the black man who was murdered outside the social club in Willingboro 2 days ago? See, it's very selective.
Who was the tennis player that was hostage in Russia? Who was the young man that happened to have fallen and found his way into North Korea, ended up having all his teeth taken out, and ultimately died?
So in other words, what do we
know about those people?
So in other words, if a death advances a political agenda, they will be made household names, and they'll be in the front page and headlines of the news all the time. But if they advance the wrong political agenda or don't advance any political agenda, they're just forgotten as if they never happened. That's the world of socialism. That's the world of communism. That's the world that George Orwell wrote book after book to describe. Animal Farm, 1984, Homage to Catalonia. But Americans, our kids are not taught to read books by George Orwell anymore, are they? So not only are they sexualizing our kids, but and not only are they complaining of inserting all these horrible books into our school system, but they're leaving out important, vital books, including like Mark Twain wrote a book called Innocents Abroad, where he talked about how he went to Palestine in 1867 and the place was completely vacant and empty. You could travel for days without seeing another person. But those books are not in our library, right?
Right. If this was President Trump and there were 5 hostages being held by Hamas, he'd be telling Hamas, they're here in America in 12 hours. They're back. How can we have American hostages since October 7th? We don't even, I'm not even sure how many there were then. I'm not even sure how many have been killed. I don't even know their names.
Right.
How does that happen in America?
It happens because we no longer have, longer have a free government. We have a controlled media, a government with a political agenda, and if you're on the wrong side of that agenda, any facts that promote your agenda are inconvenient, and they will not be reported. All right, Linda, we've got to take it.
Wait. Why isn't the president talking about these 5 American hostages?
Well, why do you think?
I know.
I just answered the question. Does it advance his political agenda? No. Does it help make his political allies stronger? No. Will it give him campaign money and support? No.
Well, who's mad about it? Who's upset about it?
So it's a concept called, the Russians or communists called it communist justice or Bolshevik justice or revolutionary justice. And that is, if it doesn't promote the revolution and the people leading the revolution, it is not justice, and we won't mention it. Linda, thank you so much. We've got to take a break right now.
The finest fresh fruit and produce you'll find anywhere? Check. Award-winning gift baskets and fruit baskets? Check. Baked goods and prepared foods? Check. They check all the boxes. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield. And that's not all. Gourmet items, specialty foods, and catering for all occasions. It's all right there. Check them out online at bfmazzio.com. That's bfmazzio.com. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield.
I'm Seth Grossman for libertyandprosperity.com. Everyone who lives near the ocean or the bay knows that we have a bad storm and flooding about every 20 years. Some people want their shore houses built on pilings. However, others like me would rather pay for major repairs and improvements every 20 years than walk up and down an extra set of steps every day. At one time, Americans were free to decide what kind of house we lived in, but not anymore. If you live in any shore town from Brigantine to Cape May, you may not get a permit for new bathrooms or new kitchen unless you first spend another $75,000 to raise your house 14 feet off the ground. Learn the details and what we can do about it. Visit libertyandprosperity.com. Help us reach more people. Join our weekly breakfast. Donate what you can to keep us on the air and online. libertyandprosperity.com. And this is Seth Grossman sitting in for John DeMasi until noon. Phone lines are open, 609-407-1450 if you'd like to join in. Otherwise, you'll have to listen to my 25 talking points, or as many of them as I could get to. And by the way, all those talking points are posted on our website at libertyandprosperity.com, as well as the recordings of everything we talk about. Normally, I call in to John DeMasi from 10 minutes after 9 to 9:30 every Saturday, but today I'm hosting the whole program. But all those recordings are posted on our website. And if you don't like what's posted on our website, come to a libertyandprosperity.com weekly breakfast at Sal's Coal-Fired Pizza, but they make a heck of a breakfast. We're in the banquet room every Saturday morning from 9:30 to 10:30. You're welcome to join the discussion. And if there's something on our website you don't like, talk to us about it, and we may end up changing it. I'd like to talk about something that's sort of personal and painful. Because I'm Jewish, I'm often asked, well, especially now with all the anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish comments that are just flooding social media, Facebook, Twitter, which is now called X, and you hear it a lot even on talk radio. I'm being told, well, are you loyal to, or I'm asked, are you loyal to Israel or to America? Where is your loyalty? And the best answer I could give to that is both Israel and America are based on the same values, based on the same Bible. The founders, of course, we all know John Adams and George Washington and Benjamin Franklin all talked about democracy in America could only work for a moral people. And even a skeptic like Thomas Jefferson said, he said, I read all the best ethics and morality of the ancient writers. I've read about Socrates and Aristotle, and I can't even remember all the Greek and Roman philosophers he talked about, Cicero. But he said the Bible is the most effective book or collection of books teaching morality that has happened in the civilized world. So both Israel and America, based on those same values, and ironically, because we based our lives on those values, the Ten Commandments, love your neighbor as thyself, with compassion, with sympathy, with understanding, with open discussions, we prospered. Our liberty brought prosperity in Israel and in America. You compare the wealth of Israel, even spending an enormous amount of money on defense, with the standard of living of Western Europe. And Israel has a higher standard of living, as does America. So the same values, the same attitudes, and we also, because of our success, it is the success of Jews in Israel and America that is why we are so hated and have so many enemies, because it's the common resentment and envy of successful people. Envy, one of the most deadly of all sins. And so when you think about it, not only are our values the same, but the history of America and Israel are very similar. America, when you look back, was settled by losers. When the Protestants fought the Catholics in Europe and the Catholics lost, it was the Catholics who came to Maryland to escape. When the Puritans of England lost in England, they came and they found in Massachusetts. When the Irish rebelled against the English and lost, and when the Scots rebelled and they lost, they came to America. When the Huguenots, the French Protestants, lost in France and were massacred, they came to America. In fact, Paul Revere, one of our greatest patriots, his father was a French Protestant who fled to America, as were the Beauregards of South Carolina. So what we did, what Americans did, we created great wealth with nothing but freedom and hard work and training and dedication. And ironically, that's exactly how the Jews built up Israel. The Arabs had no interest in Palestine, as it was then called, until the Jews got there. It was only after the Jews bought empty desert land and malaria swamp, and they paid top dollar for that land. And after they drained the swamps and watered the deserts and built up the cities and planted the trees and made a desert bloom again, only then did the Arabs from neighboring countries move in. So both Israel and Americans had the same attitude, the same values, the same idea that if life treated you bad in the past, we didn't demand reparations. We didn't demand the sympathy of the world. We just went on with our lives, Americans and Jews alike, in America and Israel, to just build a new life from nothing. And that's the key to our success and the key to our resentment. And I'm just going to give an example. The song Yankee Doodle. Were we able to find that song? Very few people know where the term Yankee or Yankee Doodle or where the song came from. But that song symbolizes sort of what I'm talking about. And I met a gentleman who heard me, give this explanation years ago, and he asked me to do it again. So in case you're unfamiliar with the patriotic song Yankee Doodle, which, by the way, is no longer taught to our children, let's hear it.
Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. Father, I went down to camp along with Captain Goody. There we saw the men and boys as thick as hasty pudding. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
All right. Now, where's the term Yankee Doodle? What does it mean? Where did it come from? Well, see, actually, that was a slur against Americans that the British used to insult Americans. Yankee? Well, see, Yankee was making fun of the fact that you had so many immigrants in America from Dutch and German countries that they couldn't pronounce the word Johnny correctly. They couldn't say the J word, so they'd say Yankee. That was the nickname for Americans, people who couldn't speak proper English. And doodle, of course, meant dodo, someone who's stupid. So Yankee Doodle, the stupid, people who can't even pronounce the name Johnny right. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. In other words, they were so broke they didn't even have money for a decent horse, so they'd ride a pony. The word macaroni was the slang term for Italian back then. Macaroni was Italian, and of course, back in the 1700s, Italy was the center of fashion in Europe. All the latest fashion would come out of Italy. So an American wouldn't have enough money to get high, fancy Italian fashion. So they just take a feather, stick it in his hat, and say, "See, I'm macaroni. I have high Italian fashion." So the whole song was an insult. I saw Captain Washington. He had 200 guys. I thought there were 1 million. So during the French and Indian War, the English made that song Yankee Doodle to insult Americans. It was almost like the N-word. To call someone a Yankee was one of the worst slurs an Englishman could use to describe an American. And then during Lexington and Concord, when the British troops came out of Boston and they massacred about 20 or 30 colonial militiamen who were just there they weren't even there to fight the British. They were just there to show that they knew the British were coming and that they weren't surprised by them, and they were murdered anyway. After the murder, the British band of that British unit would play the song Yankee Doodle to insult the Americans. So how did a song about a slur of Americans get to be the symbol of America? Well, after the Americans won the war and got the British to surrender at Yorktown 7 years later, the American band played Yankee Doodle. So to me, and when I hear all the terms that you have to use the right pronouns, you can't use insults, everybody is so sensitive. But I think it's so important to remember that Americans, instead of being ashamed or embarrassed or telling people, "You can't call me a Yankee," they took an insult and they turned it into an expression of pride, because it wasn't the word that was bad, it's your attitude. If you have confidence and you're proud of who you are, people could call you any name in the book, and it's not going to bother you. So I just thought I'd bring that up, and I guess it's time for a break right now. Phone lines are open, 609-407-1450 if you'd like to join in the discussion. Otherwise, I'm just going to move on to another topic.
If you're interested in driving one of the finest automobiles on the market today, then you'll want to check out all of the fabulous new and pre-owned Lexus at Lexus of Atlantic City. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Driving a Lexus is like no other vehicle on the market. Test drive one for yourself at Lexus of Atlantic City. Whether it's new or pre-owned, you'll be more than satisfied. In fact, Lexus is consistently number one when it comes to customer satisfaction. Visit Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Or you can check out their outstanding selection of new, pre-owned, and L-certified pre-owned vehicles on their website, LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. That's LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. Or, if you want more information, call 609-641-0008. Lexus of Atlantic City, now celebrating their 26th year in the area. A dealership that you'll enjoy. No pressure, no gimmicks, no hassle, no hype. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. And remember, always online at LexusOfAtlanticCity.com.
The finest fresh fruit and produce you'll find anywhere? Check. Award-winning gift baskets and fruit baskets? Check. Baked goods and prepared foods? Check. They check all the boxes. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield. And that's not all. Gourmet items, specialty foods, and catering for all occasions. It's all right there. Check them out online at bfmazzio.com. That's bfmazzio.com. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield.
Your WPG Talk Radio 95.5 AccuWeather forecast for South Jersey. For this afternoon, very warm with sunshine giving way to clouds, high up to 87. Low clouds tonight, low 59. Times of clouds and sunshine tomorrow with high 81. Memorial Day Monday, considerably cloudy, humid in the afternoon with a gusty thunderstorm. Could bring downpours, hail, and damaging winds with high 75. I'm AccuWeather's Ruth O'Brien on WPG Talk Radio 95.5.
And this is Seth Grossman back again. And we had Greg of Absecon called back, but I just have this policy of having one caller on one topic for one program. I know John does it differently, but I'd like to free up the lines for other folks with different thoughts. 609-407-1450. In the meantime, I'd like to talk about socialism versus American liberty. So often you hear that, the biggest danger to America is the extreme right. And when I was a professor at Atlantic Cape Community College, one of my biggest problems was the lies being taught to our kids since they're in grade school on almost everything. And one of the biggest lies is this thing called the left-right continuum. And it was said that the extreme left is like North Korea in Kim Jong-il and the communist dictatorship that you have in Korea on the extreme left. And on the extreme right is Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. And close to the extreme right is Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan. And then further moderate on the left is Communist China and Fidel Castro and so on. And in the middle are the good old, Franklin Roosevelt New Deal liberals. But really, that's really a big lie that was sort of invented after World War II. And the communists invented that lie because they were so embarrassed that in 1939, the communists on the so-called left with Joseph Stalin made an alliance with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis on the so-called extreme right. And the communists and the Nazis divided up Europe and went on to destroy and occupy France and went to war against England and the United States. And they did that because they thought they had a lot in common with each other. And they did. Because all of socialism, when you think about it, and by the way, that was a trick question I would ask my students. I would say, what's the difference between communism and socialism? And they'd spend minutes and minutes and minutes trying to figure out the difference and explain it in essays. But the fact is that communism and socialism both describe the same system. It's where the society or the people ruling the government have all the power. And people are too stupid or too greedy to know what's best for them, so they need to have enlightened leaders tell them exactly what to do. And the opposite of that, of course, is American liberty, where each individual is free to make the most important decisions in his or her own life. And the only reason that, socialists and communists got to use different names is almost an accident. You see, in World War I, Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Communist Party who took over Russia after World War I, but before World War I, he was in charge of what was called the World Socialist Organization. And he not only controlled the socialist parties of Germany and Russia and all of Europe and the British Labour Party, but also in America, many of our big labor unions, especially the ones that were based out of Chicago. Chicago for 100 years was the main socialist and communist center in America. In fact, until the communists took over Russia after World War I, most socialists and communists expected that the first communist country in the world would be the United States, and that the revolution would start in Chicago. In fact, the main communist and socialist holiday is called May 1st, May Day. That holiday began in America, in Chicago, to celebrate what was called the Haymarket riots of, I guess, 1882 or 1883. So what is socialism or communism at its essence, it's basically the idea that it's based on greed, it's based on envy, it's based on the idea that if you don't have what you think you're entitled to in life, if you don't have enough money, if you don't have enough respect, if you don't have good enough clothes, whatever it is you want in life, you believe that you have the right for the government to take something from somebody else and give it to you. That's the essence of socialism. The opposite of that is American liberty, which was explained by Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin spent his entire life writing this newspaper called Paul Richard's Almanac. And he would talk to young men and women. And if he would say, if you're unhappy with your life, here's what you could do to make your own life better. He would tell men and women how important it was to get married. He said a single person is like half a pair of scissors. There's no better economic or social partnership than marriage. He would tell people early to bed, early to rise. A penny saved is a penny earned. He would tell people if you didn't have a rich family, how you could substitute for a rich family by forming groups or association with other people who are just as broke as you are, and you would help each other out. And he led to the Chamber of Commerce, and we actually model our Liberty and Prosperity meetings out of that. So again, America became wealthy because individuals made their own decision. By the way, you had a professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania called Amy Wax, said the same thing. She gave an interview to the Philadelphia Inquirer about 7 years ago, where she said statistically it's proven that any American can succeed of any ethnic group, whether you're black, white, immigrant, whatever religion, if you follow three simple rules. Before you have children, get married, finish high school, acquire a skill, and get a job, and then have children. And she proved that 95% of every American who did that had a successful, comfortable, and prosperous life. By the way, what happened to Amy Wax? She was denounced for being a racist, even though she was the dean of a law school, a tenured professor. She was stripped of her teaching ability, stripped of her job, fired. Her career was ruined for saying that obvious truth. So now let's look at some examples of what socialism is and what American freedom is. Now, to succeed in socialism, again, because if you have a socialist system, whether you succeed and fail in life has nothing to do with your talent, your skill, your work, your lifestyle changes. It has everything to do with your, quote, personal relationships. You somehow develop a personal relationship with people with power. You get out the vote. You get your people elected. And then you use government to get what you want by taking stuff away from somebody else. And you get what you want by getting a government job, a government contract, free food, free medical benefits, free house, public housing, and so on. And if you're on the losing side of an election, then you're just out of luck. And that explains a lot why we have so much voter fraud, because it used to be in America, most people didn't care about politics because the only people directly affected by politics were a handful of people with city or county jobs. But now everything in your life depends on whether you're on the losing side or winning side of politics. And so when I hear on this station and so on many other places, I hear a lot, not everybody, I hear a lot of people complaining about Marty Small and Laquetta Small, who basically used the socialist model to succeed. And in a way, I sympathize with them for feeling picked on, because they did favors for Governor Murphy. Governor Murphy does favors for them. They do favor for other people. Marty Small gave the $350,000 of corona relief money to the veterans to build the monument to honor Bernie Friedenberg. And so because they did favors for others, others do favors for him. And so now Marty Small has a $160,000 a year job as mayor of Atlantic City. His wife, LaQuetta, has a $240,000 a year job as superintendent of schools. They're the model of success. And I could understand why, when they're being attacked for doing what they did, they feel they're being attacked for being black, because after all, Don Guardian did the same kind of politics with Governor Chris Christie, and everybody talked about how wonderful he was. Anyway, so that's the a brief explanation. Do we have one more message, or are we done? No, you know. Oh, okay. I thought we had a break. So let me give you another example of socialism in action. The Atlantic City Housing Authority. You have thousands of people. I forget how many housing units you have, but I would say about 1/3 of all the people living in Atlantic City live in either public housing run by the government or other housing paid for with some government program. And you see that the conditions in Atlantic City public housing run by the government agency called the Atlantic City Housing Authority are miserable. No heat, filthy conditions, apartments are falling apart. Nobody is responding to anything. And Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew said, we have to have the federal government take over and run the Atlantic City Housing Authority. And to me, that really misses the whole point. Because the whole point is, why is the government in the housing business in the first place? Until 40 years ago, even the poorest people, could afford decent housing that was provided by private landlords, private landowners, who paid taxes. Now you have most people are living in housing units that don't pay any real estate taxes, which force everybody else to pay higher real estate taxes. How do we get to that situation? And instead of saying, how can we make public housing better, we should be saying the whole idea of public housing or government-run housing is offensive. We should find out what is causing private housing to be so expensive. And it's very easy to figure out what happened to private housing. First of all, real estate taxes are too high. And real estate taxes are too high because the teachers union and other government unions and other government construction unions have made it unsustainable to build new schools, to build and maintain roads, to pay the salaries of government workers. I mean, I was just in City Hall to get a birth certificate a couple of days ago. It's amazing how many people are in City Hall just with not very much to do. It's the best way I could put it. So instead of saying we're spending too much money, we're hiring too many people, we're paying them salaries that are too high, we're paying government workers or government contractors 3 or 4 times as much money to build stuff and do stuff as people in the private world who have to pay the taxes. And we have so many work rules, an electric. The classic case is if somebody puts on a light in your house, in your yard, you'll hire somebody and he'll install the light. If the electric cable goes under the sidewalk, he'll break up the sidewalk. He'll put the cable underneath the sidewalk, and then he'll replace the sidewalk. If it's done by the government, you need one special union that just does the electric lights. One special union digs up the sidewalk. Another union has to put the concrete back together. And it may be a 1 or 2 hour job to do it, but you have to pay somebody for 8 hours or 6 hours just to be there. So the cost is ridiculous. But instead of dealing with the waste and the cost to bring property taxes down, what does government do? It says, okay, we're going to let 1/3 of our residents live in housing that doesn't pay any taxes. And then we're going to take our senior citizens who vote more than anybody else, and we're going to give them tax breaks. So what are we doing? We're breaking the back of ordinary middle-class families trying to raise children. And the people running public housing, they're not accountable to anybody because they got their jobs through politics, not by making the tenants happy. So what's the solution? The solution, I think, is if we had real Republicans who stood for Republican principles, they say, you know what? Public housing stinks, and that's what happens when you have socialism. So let's do what Margaret Thatcher did in England when she had the same problem 50 or 60 years ago. Let's sell the public housing to the tenants. Let's make them property owners. Let's turn those public housing units into condominiums and give the people their houses and give them enough money to fix up their houses. And now the government is out of the housing business, and let the people, when they move out of their housing units that they now own, then they could rent out the units and they could be landlords and they could join the middle class. And you know who's doing something just like that? The only politician I really appreciate right now in Argentina, Javier Milei. He campaigned for president by holding up a chainsaw, saying he was going to get government out of doing all the things that government has no business doing in the first place. And after years of inflation of 300%, 400%, 1,000%, inflation is coming down. The budget is being balanced. People in Argentina are now doing productive jobs instead of useless government jobs. And even more important, Javier Milei is going around the world telling everybody, fight for freedom, fight the socialist, speak out against socialism everywhere, in the classroom, in politics, on the radio and TV and in the movies. And he's not only doing the right thing, he's saying the right thing. And we have the Javier Milei post on our libertyandprosperity.com website. I invite you to look at it. All right, am I getting close to the top of the hour break? I got 1 minute. And, by the way, one of the things that came out with Argentina is the mainstream press is saying, the GDP, the gross domestic product of Argentina is going down. That's when you start to learn that these statistics, the employment statistics, are all totally useless. Because what good is saying we have full employment, but half the people working are doing jobs that don't need to be done? How many are diversity, equity, and inclusion administrators? How many are government inspectors who are keeping you from fixing up your house? How many people are making up laws that shouldn't and rules that shouldn't be enforced in the first place? And you find out that all these statistics are totally useless. And John C. Cowperthwaite, who created the Miracle of Hong Kong, he decided not to take any statistics. We'll be back after the top of the hour break.
WPGG Atlantic City, WENJ HD3 Millville, a Town Square media station. Everything you need to know in 6 minutes starts now. WPG Talk Radio 95.5 presents Talk with a Purpose. Join the conversation by calling 609-407-1450. Now the host of Talk with a Purpose, John DeMasi.
Well, this is Seth Grossman covering this morning's program for John DeMasi. If you want to know more about libertyandprosperity.com, which has been my passion for the past 20 years. In fact, now that I've retired from law and my colleagues are down in Florida with their retirement hobbies of pickleball, pinochle, and golf. My retirement hobby here in Somers Point, New Jersey is doing my best to save Western civilization. And if you'd like to join our efforts, please go to libertyandprosperity.com. And if you see our post and you agree with them, please don't keep them to yourself. And please don't complain about how unfair the media is, because you have the ability to be your own media just by going to our articles, looking at the Facebook icon at the bottom or the Twitter icon or X icon at the bottom, and just click that button to share what you like on our website with your friends, and that's how we get the word out. And if you click the X or Twitter icon, you get the full link to the article, so you could copy that and then paste it in the comments section of any of your favorite online newspapers or in emails to your friends. And that's how we get the word out. And if you really like what we're doing, please donate to Liberty and Prosperity by either sending a check to our Somers Point office, which used to be my law office, 453 Shore Road in Somers Point, cat corner from the Wawa, across from the Dairy Queen. A lot of folks drive by and I see them and just slip the check in the mail slot there, or pay online through the website at libertyandprosperity.com. We're a tax-exempt 501c3 organization. So if you give a big enough donation, take it off your taxes too. So that's how to keep in touch with us. I was listening to the top of the news about our new officers in our Army coming out of West Point. And on this Memorial Day, as we hear the stories of our really disappearing group of veterans from World War II, from Korea, and now even Vietnam, we realize the tragedy of what has happened to our military. Because basically, America has not won a war since 1945. In World War II, 1945, America defeated the combined power of Nazi Germany, which at that time occupied much of Europe, Italy, and Japan. And we forget that the war against Japan was in many ways similar to the war that Israel is now fighting against Hamas. Notice I said Hamas and not Palestine, because there really is no such thing as a Palestinian nation. The Arabs who live in what used to be known as Palestine speak the same language, have the same culture, have the same religion, and are members of the same clans and families as Arabs living in Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. The geographical area of Palestine is almost like saying the nation of Staten Island. You know, it's just a geographic area, but not a separate nation. Hamas doesn't even have the name Palestine anywhere. It's not part of its name. It's not part of its goal. Hamas is part of what's called the Wahhabi cult, that is very similar to the cult that was running Japan when they went to war against America in 1941. It was basically a Shinto cult of a Shinto religion, where basically a modern group of Japanese generals basically reinvented an ancient religion and perverted it into a cult of violence, war, and death. Japanese children were taught since elementary school that the Japanese were a superior people who were destined to rule the world, that the emperor was descended from the gods, that the most noble thing any Japanese citizen could do was to die in the service of the emperor. And so in 1931, Japan began the conquest of first Korea and then China, with horrible rapes and massacres wherever they went. And at that time, America was supplying Japan with oil, rubber, and tin that was needed by their military. And then in 1937, when the Japanese did a horrible massacre in Nanking, China. And by the way, all the details of that massacre are posted on our libertyandprosperity.com website. We can't fit all the articles on the homepage, but we do have a very good search engine. So if you would go to the libertyandprosperity.com website and type in the words Nanking, Nanking, in the search bar, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And so when America said we will stop giving tin, oil, and rubber to Japan until it stops murdering all of its peaceful neighbors, then Japan attacked our fleet. And then they invaded what is today called Indonesia. Then it was called the Dutch East Indies, so they could get all of the raw materials they needed without going to the United States. So that's how we got into World War II against Japan. And, of course, 4 days later, Nazi Germany, declared war on us because they didn't like the fact that we were helping the English stay and the Russians stay in the war. When we went to war against Japan, when we invaded Japanese territory on certain of their islands, and especially in Okinawa, we dealt with the same situation that the Israelis are dealing with in Gaza. There were suicidal attacks on Americans. The Japanese trained the women and children to fight and prepare booby traps. And so thousands of Japanese civilians were killed in that horrible conflict. And that horrible conflict did not come to an end until we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. What we failed to recognize is that this cult of Hamas is identical to that warped cult of death, war, and conquest that the Japanese people embraced during the 1930s and 1940s. And it's all put down in a fascinating book by Charles Allen called God's Terrorists. But without going into too much detail, I'll try to simplify it as best as I can. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three of these religions began as tribal religions. And you could read the Old Testament of the Bible. You could read the book of Joshua, the book of Numbers, and you'll read these horrible passages of where the Hebrew tribes kill Canaanites, men, women, and children, and you had these horrible massacres. But our religion does not call on us to do these things today, because the Bible is not a book. It's a collection of books that shows the progress of humanity from the days of the Bronze Age and the Stone Age to learn to become more civilized, to become more like God, to change from murder and conquest to the 10 Commandments, love your neighbor as yourself, and the parable of the Good Samaritan. And basically, back in the time of Jesus, a Samaritan was a Palestinian. where Jesus was saying that if a Palestinian or a Samaritan treats you with kindness, you must repay him or her with that same kindness. So Islam started to develop the same way that Judaism and Christianity developed, to become more tolerant, more understanding, more civilized, and so on. But then, and by the way, when Islam was tolerant and more civilized, you had an era of prosperity called the Golden Age of Islam, with the algebra, with the literature, with the poetry, and a lot of those good things. But starting in the Crusades, and by the way, the Crusades ended with peace and tolerance. The Crusaders, the Christians, realized that they were not going to wipe out the Muslims. The Muslims realized they were not going to wipe out the Christians. So they reached an understanding where Christians and Jews were allowed to live peacefully in those Arab territories, and things were moving in the right direction. But then you had a radical Saudi Arabian, actually it wasn't the Saudis back then, but it was in Arabia, called Ibn Taymiyyah, wrote a doctrine that went like this. He said, we Muslims, when Muhammad was alive, Muhammad and his first 3 generation of followers, our pious predecessors, who are called the Salafis. When Muhammad and the Salafis were running the religion, we, the Muslims, wiped out the Persian Empire. We conquered India. We wiped out most of the Greek, Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire, and we took all of Egypt, we took all of North Africa, and we conquered Spain. We Muslims, under Muhammad, under the first 3 generations of his followers, were unbeatable and unstoppable. And that was when we were doing all jihad all the time. Murder, massacre, intolerance, subjugating women, all the horrible stuff that you see the Taliban doing today. And Ibn Taymiyyah said, Islam is no longer successful because we're not as barbaric as we used to be. And his teachings were picked up by a guy called Muhammad Wahhab, also from Arabia, in the 1700s. And he took the doctrine that Islam had to return to its roots of being barbaric, of being cruel, of being murderous, of robbing anyone who is not of the same persuasion, including fellow Muslims, by the way, of raping women, of enslaving people, all the barbaric stuff of the Dark Ages. And that cult became very successful in Arabia. And without going into too much detail, the Wahhabis actually declared jihad against the Turks, who were running the caliphate, who were running the Muslim world at the time. And the Turks basically wiped out the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. They went into every Wahhabi village. They killed every male over the age of 10, and they thought they had wiped out the Wahhabi movement. But unknown to the Turks, the Wahhabi movement had moved to Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, they began conquering areas of India. And in 1857, the Wahhabis did a barbaric rebellion in India, where they massacred thousands of Christian and Hindu and Buddhist and Sikh men, women, and children. And after a bloody revolt in 1857, they were crushed in a brutal way. And I found out about it almost accidentally. If I would ask you, what's the capital of India? You'll probably say, well, it's called New Delhi. True. Ever think about what happened to Old Delhi? Well, Old Delhi was the center of the Wahhabi movement, and it was completely wiped out, and they built a brand new city. The British, the Hindus, the Buddhists, and the Sikhs in India. So that was the massive defeat of the Wahhabi movement. After that defeat, this cult of violence, hatred, intolerance was pretty much on the fringe of Islam. You had it in corners of Saudi Arabia. You had it in Afghanistan. But then, in the early 1900s, you had a Saudi prince called Ibn Saud, S-A-U-D, and he formed this powerful movement based on the Wahhabi cult called the Muslim Brotherhood. And he took complete control of Arabia. And we know a little bit about him because from the movie Lawrence of Arabia. Basically, the British, with Lawrence of Arabia, backed one group, one tribe in Arabia, and basically the tribe in Arabia, backed by the British, got wiped out by the Wahhabis under Saud and the Muslim Brotherhood. So they took over all of Arabia, and nobody would have paid too much attention to this radical, dangerous cult of Islam. And moderate Muslims and Turks that were just not on the radar screen of Americans or Europeans or anybody else, except for one small thing. In 1938, oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia, and it turned out to be the most productive oil field ever found anywhere on Earth. And suddenly these, violent, backward, primitive cult members suddenly had more money than anyone else in the Islamic world. And in 1973, after the war with Israel and the oil blockade, oil prices increased 10 times. And with that oil money, what the Saudis did is they took this primitive, violent, intolerant cult of Islam, and they made it the dominant religion by setting up sophisticated and well-paid schools throughout the world. And you see those schools in Atlantic City. You see those schools throughout Western Europe. You see those schools throughout India and Pakistan. They inspired the Taliban. They inspired Osama bin Laden and ISIS, and even brought about massacres in the Philippines. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And Hamas is a classic Wahhabi, Salafi, Jihadi, Muslim Brotherhood organizations. And that's what they're fighting for. They're identical to the Japanese of World War II. Their goal was not a two-state solution. Their goal is to kill, enslave, rob, and rape as many non-believers as they can. And non-believers, by the way, includes Muslims who do not share their radical beliefs. So this is what we were up against. And the only way you can defeat an enemy that determined is to do what the Turks did to the Wahhabis in 1818, to do what the British and the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Sikhs did to the Wahhabis in India in 1857, and to do what America did to the Japanese in 1945. Anything less than that, and the barbarians win. It's an ugly fact. It's an unpleasant fact. But that's the reality that we're dealing with. And every time we see in our college campuses where our kids are being taught, the Israelis are the responsible for all that violence, it just shows that we have not taught our children some of the most important lessons of history that need to be learned. And you don't have to go too far to see the ignorance of our children. Right here at Stockton University, one of the professors who got hired to do the Holocaust program is a woke leftist guy who's Jewish, a professor who was also teaching his students that Israel is guilty of genocide for trying to defend itself from these barbarians. So this is what we have to do as Americans. We've got to educate our children, and we've got to do it the same way our enemies are educating our children. We've got to talk to them from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, to our nieces and nephews. We've got to take control of our public schools and teach the true history of what really happened, not the propaganda history that promotes a political left-wing woke agenda. And we've also got to take control of our colleges again. And it's a daunting task, and I hope that we have not gone too far down that road, but there is hope. We've got to learn from Argentina. We've got to see what Javier Milei is doing there, and we've got to prepare and educate and train people who understand all this to go into politics, and we have to help them win. And that's one of the goals of libertyandprosperity.com. All right, let's take our final break. And then I went way, way long in the time. So if anyone wants to call in, and again, I do not, like to have the same people call over and over again. So if you haven't called yet this morning, phone lines are open 609-407-1450. Thank you.
If you're interested in driving one of the finest automobiles on the market today, then you'll want to check out all of the fabulous new and pre-owned Lexus at Lexus of Atlantic City. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Driving a Lexus is like no other vehicle on the market. Test drive one for yourself at Lexus of Atlantic City. Whether it's new or pre-owned, you'll be more than satisfied. In fact, Lexus is consistently #1 when it comes to customer satisfaction. Visit Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Or you can check out their outstanding selection of new, pre-owned, and L-certified pre-owned vehicles on their website, LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. That's LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. Or, if you want more information, call 609-641-0008. Lexus of Atlantic City, now celebrating their 26th year in the area. A dealership that you'll enjoy. No pressure, no gimmicks, no hassle, no hype. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. And remember, always online at LexusOfAtlanticCity.com.
The finest fresh fruit and produce you'll find anywhere? Check. Award-winning gift baskets and fruit baskets? Check. Baked goods and prepared foods? Check. They check all the boxes. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield. And that's not all. Gourmet items, specialty foods, and catering for all occasions. It's all right there. Check them out online at bfmazzio.com. That's bfmazzio.com. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield.
And this is Seth Grossman back with our final 31 minutes of Talk with a Purpose with me, Seth Grossman of libertyandprosperity.com, substituting for John DeMasi. Before I leave Israel and Palestine, it's interesting that about a month ago, the United States and President Biden were denouncing Israel for starving the Palestinian people. And the Israelis said, are you kidding us? We have been delivering more food for Gaza since they started the war than was ever coming into the country after they started the war. But the problem is Hamas is deliberately starving its people and they're stealing all the food. Now that I explain what Hamas is all about, you understand that in their view, winning against the kafir or the unbeliever or the infidel should be done by any means necessary. And political warfare or ideological warfare or psychological warfare or, quote, asymmetrical warfare is just as effective as actually winning victories on the battlefield. So Hamas knows that if they could show these heart-rending pictures of people starving and of children getting killed, their children getting killed, the more people who starve and the more of their children who get killed, the better it is for them. And of course, if you believe in the Wahhabi cult of Islam, you believe that by having innocent children killed and by having people starve to death is a good thing, because the people who starve to death, the Muslims who starve to death fighting the infidel, and the children who are killed by deliberately, being right next to where munition is being stored, where weapons and rockets are being fired, it's a good thing, because in their view, any Muslim, whether an infant or an adult or a woman or a child who is killed fighting the infidel becomes a shaheed, a martyr, and they are instantly forgiven of all sins, and they spend eternity in paradise. So as far as Hamas is concerned, when Palestinians starve to death, when children are killed, when their own children are killed, it's a win-win situation. It helps them win the war against the infidel, and it guarantees forgiveness of sin and eternal life for those who die. So anyway, so when Israel was saying we're doing everything we can to not hurt children, we're doing everything we can to get food to these people, but Hamas is deliberately putting these children in the middle of combat situations. The Palestinians are deliberately starving the people. President Biden said, we don't believe Israel. We're going to spend $330 million to build a pier, and we're going to have American trucks unload food on that pier, and we're going to deliver it directly to the starving Palestinian people. And that pier went into operation last week. Guess what happened? Within 3 hours, all of the food that was supposed to be delivered to the Palestinian people, provided by the Americans, with a $330 million pier, was stolen by Hamas. So Hamas is getting all this food. They're selling it on the black market. They're making lots of money, and people are still starving. So that's what happened there. By the way, since I'm going through a couple loose ends, one thing that I would like to touch on, there's been a lot of talk, and let's see if I can find it, about September 11th. There's been a lot of lies and a lot of conspiracy theories. And there are people actually trying to imply that someone other than these Wahhabi extremists caused the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11th. But before I go there, and I hope I'll have time to talk about it, I see we have Ethel Hermanow of the Galloway Township Board of Education calling as an individual to talk to us about what's going on in our public schools and what parents and taxpayers can and should do about it. Ethel, you're on the air. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Seth, how are you?
Well, I'm tired. It's been a long 3 hours. I don't know how John does this every week.
I wanted to call sooner, but I'm actually working today, but I wanted to make sure I took some time to call in. So just so you know, I'm not calling on behalf of the Galloway School Board. I have to give my little commercial bite, because I'm calling as a grandmother, as a mother, and as a citizen, that I am very concerned about what's happening in our schools. And anybody that's paying attention, and I know a lot of people just don't understand what's really going on in our school boards, from kindergarten all the way up, and now they have preschool, just being taught this indoctrination. And if you don't have a school board that's conservative, and honestly, it blows my mind that it's not more, but that really cares about family values or really cares about this God in general, which is the most important thing. You think that they would be doing more to be more proactive and then tell the parents what's happening. Like, for instance, this is Pride Month coming up. If you go on the New Jersey State Education Association website, you'll see there's a flag for the Pride already and everything else. Where's the American flag? Where's the American values? Where's the godly values? I'm just so over it, but you have to pay attention. You have to run for school board. You have to find out the bills that they're passing. They're constantly passing bills to hurt and usurp our power, the parents' power. People have to understand our children need to be protected. So,
and of course, what I could add to that is the reason that the teachers union and the radical woke left are so successful is that every Democrat in New Jersey, from Governor Murphy to his appointees on the State Board of Education, to the state legislature, the Democratic majority in the state Senate, Democrat majority in the state legislature, the assembly, and all those local officials are in lockstep to help the teachers union and the library association and all those woke folks implement this leftist agenda, which if you go to our libertyandprosperity.com website, we have that whole video by Yuri Bezmenov explaining why they're doing this. Because to their view, the woke leftist communist, that ideological subversion is the most civilized form of warfare. Because if you want to conquer an enemy, it's much better, instead of having an army kill people and get killed, if you could persuade your enemy to commit suicide, that's the best way to win a war. And what they have been doing for the past 60 years is persuading America to commit suicide with all these things. So everybody is finding themselves. Everybody's pursuing these I guess, goals. And those goals do not include getting married and having children and raising those children to be productive, independent, educated citizens. It's completely not even in the equation. And the Democrats are doing this, and the Republicans, for the most part, there are some exceptions, but most Republicans in this town, all they care about is getting control of the city council or the township committee or the mayor, so they could pick the attorney, so they could pick the township engineer, so they could pick who gets the insurance contract, who gets this contract, who gets this building contract, so they could take care of their friends and relatives. And they're afraid to take on the public schools because they're afraid if they start getting involved in public school elections, then the teachers union is going to go after them, and then they won't get their goodies for themselves and their families. So we can't depend on the Republican Party to take care of their schools, the parents, and the kids. And it's a sad truth, but ordinary people who never took an interest in politics have to start paying attention.
Seth, can I just add something at the end there?
Sure.
Everybody that's listening, the one thing you can do, and I know you're probably wondering, what can you do? You can run for school board. You have till July 29th. Believe me, the New Jersey School Board Association, they go out of their way to make sure people run for school board for them that are in the schools that are already drank the Kool-Aid. We need the parents and the grandparents to start running for school boards. It's easy enough to do. We can make a change if we have enough people to vote the right way. We have a Christian nation. It's time that we start acting like it. I think we've forgotten who we are.
All right. Well, that's it. And here's the benefit. And I have no illusions. If you run for school board and you succeed in getting elected to the school board, you're not going to change things overnight because the political establishment is going to do everything it can to stop you. But by being on the school board, you will be like an early warning radar system. You will see all the bad things coming down the pike so you could stop them and fight to stop them before they actually happen. And also, if you have the skill and ability to win a school board election, you will have the same ability to win an election for county commissioner, for township committee, for city commission, or for city council, or for mayor. So it's important, just like for the Patriots of 1776. They had to spend weeks of training and months of training to be in these militias, to learn how to fire a musket and all that stuff. But today, we don't need muskets. We need votes. We need the ability to organize, to present positions. And if you run for school board, you will quickly learn all these skills, and we could help turn the tide. So, Ethel, you're doing a heroic job. I'm so glad that you invited me to give these practical pointers at the New Life Assembly Church. And I'm very happy to say that all that seminar is now posted on our libertyandprosperity.com website, so those who were not able to attend could actually see the speeches and read the PowerPoint summaries to learn what has to be done between now and July 29th.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, Seth. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
And thank you. And what a time to break. Do we have one final break? Let's take a break, and I'd like to talk about a Christian nationalist, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sam Alito, viciously criticized by the mainstream media for flying patriotic flags at his summer beach house in New Jersey.
If you're interested in driving one of the finest automobiles on the market today, then you'll want to check out all of the fabulous new and pre-owned Lexus at Lexus of Atlantic City. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Driving a Lexus is like no other vehicle on the market. Test drive one for yourself at Lexus of Atlantic City. Whether it's new or pre-owned, you'll be more than satisfied. In fact, Lexus is consistently #1 when it comes to customer satisfaction. Visit Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. Or you can check out their outstanding selection of new, pre-owned, and L-certified pre-owned vehicles on their website, LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. That's LexusOfAtlanticCity.com. Or, if you want more information, call 609-641-0008. Lexus of Atlantic City, now celebrating their 26th year in the area. A dealership that you'll enjoy. No pressure, no gimmicks, no hassle, no hype. Lexus of Atlantic City, 3169 Fire Road in EHT. And remember, always online at LexusOfAtlanticCity.com.
The finest fresh fruit and produce you'll find anywhere? Check. Award-winning gift baskets and fruit baskets? Check. Baked goods and prepared foods? Check. They check all the boxes. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield. And that's not all. Gourmet items, specialty foods, and catering for all occasions. It's all right there. Check them out online at bfmazzio.com. That's bfmazzio.com. B.F. Mazzio, 601 New Road, Northfield.
Your WPG Talk Radio 95.5 AccuWeather forecast for South Jersey. For this afternoon, very warm with sunshine giving way to clouds, high up to 87. Low clouds tonight, low 59. Times of clouds and sunshine tomorrow with high 81. Memorial Day Monday, considerably cloudy, humid in the afternoon with a gusty thunderstorm. Could bring downpours, hail, and damaging winds with high 75. I'm AccuWeather's Ruth O'Brien on WPG Talk Radio 95.5.
And this is Seth Grossman sitting in for John DeMasi with 16 minutes left to go. And since nobody called in, I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair and the microphone to give a 16-minute filibuster of some issues that I wanted to get to, but I didn't get a chance to get to. Today, besides being part of Memorial Day weekend, is the 32nd day of the Omer. Now, of course, there are 613 laws that Jews are commanded to follow. Of course, the first law, the one given by God to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, that the earth be full of you. That's one we should be paying more attention to. Of course, one of the laws is to not to work on the Sabbath, which I'm violating. But one of those 613 laws is to count 50 days from Passover to a holiday that in Greek, the Greek word for 50 is Pentecost. And Jews call it the Shavuot holiday. Christians count basically 50 days from Easter. And there's an interesting story to that, the two holidays. Passover, the Jewish holiday, celebrates Jews escaping from slavery in Egypt and obtaining freedom. But we're told we're not supposed to celebrate the freedom to do whatever we want. Because when everyone is free to do whatever they want, the strong will attack the weak will suffer, people will lie, cheat, steal, and life will be absolutely miserable if people are free to do whatever they want to do. And liberty is not freedom. American liberty is where you are free to do whatever you want to do, but you have to respect the equal rights of everybody else to do what you want to do for yourself. And so in the Jewish tradition, we have this major holiday of Passover, which is very popular and celebrates freedom, but we're supposed to count 50 days to remember that 50 days after the Hebrew slaves left Egypt and obtained their freedom, they went to Mount Sinai, where they agreed to follow the 10 Commandments and other laws given by God at Mount Sinai, including love your neighbor as yourself. And again, that second holiday, 50 days later, is called the Pentecost, the Greek word for 50. And it's interesting how we attach so much importance to Passover and Easter, which involve freedom and celebration and redemption, but a holiday 50 days later that involves responsibility is not quite as popular as the one that celebrates freedom. So we ought to be counting those days. And again, today is the 32nd day. So we have, 18 more days to the Pentecost. The Supreme Court Justice, Sam Alito, is being attacked because at his New Jersey beach house about a week ago, his wife had a United States flag flying upside down, which, as anyone with a basic knowledge of history knows, a flag flying upside down is a sign of distress and a call for help. And so, but yet the New York Times did this expose of how this flag symbolized the January 6th insurrection and white supremacy and Christian nationalism and all these other bad things. It just shows how the media is basically distorting the truth. And then they found out that Sam Alito had flown another flag at that same beach house, a pine tree flag, where above it's a picture of a white flag with a green pine tree on it, and on top of it, it says, "An appeal to heaven." And that was a very popular flag during the American Revolution in New England, because the pine tree represented the New England states, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And an appeal to heaven was quoting from a book written by John Locke, who said basically each of us has certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and that regardless of what the government does, natural law or God's law is more important, and that our duty is to God's natural law as opposed to whatever deals politicians could come up with. So it really summarizes the American values that created this country. And, in God we trust, which is on every coin, on every one of our currencies. And yet what is reciting ordinary symbols of American patriotism that created this country. Notice how the media and the education mafia is trying to portray those classic patriotic symbols as being disloyal. And what the heck do they mean by Christian nationalist? What's wrong with Christianity? Christianity, again, the basic tenet is love your neighbor as yourself, as explained by the parable of the Good Samaritan. If your enemy or someone who's supposed to be your enemy is treating you with kindness, you treat them with kindness also. So it's the model of building civilization. In fact, there was a Chinese economist shocked communist China about 22 years ago when he wrote a book called Market Economies with Churches and Without Churches, in which he said that the reason the American economy and America as a nation was so successful was because most Americans embraced Christian Bible values of love your neighbor as yourself, and that people in America did the right thing because most Americans wanted to do the right thing, as opposed to government forcing people to do the right thing. And this economist, Zhao Xiao, urged the communist regime in China to embrace Christianity and to start teaching the Bible throughout communist China. And it turned out that the communist regime of Xi was so afraid of this that they completely cracked down on Christians, completely cracked down on Hong Kong, and are now threatening to invade Taiwan, which has in many ways embraced Christian culture. So what is wrong with having a nation based on basic Bible Christian values that are so admired and have such a positive effect throughout the world? Well, I have 7 minutes left, and I just want to touch on what is really disturbing post I'm seeing on Twitter or X or Facebook lately. And it's the idea that either the CIA or George Bush or the Mossad or Jews or Israelis somehow engineered the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11th of 2001. And one of the reasons why it should be inconceivable for anyone from the Atlantic City area to believe those theories is because two of the men who were key in understanding who caused the World Trade Center attack are from Atlantic City. And I'm sure many of you actually grew up with these two men and know who they are and know the parents. One was John O'Neill, who I believe grew up in Brigantine and graduated Holy Spirit High School in 1971. The other was Chuck Stern. He was the son of the dentist who had an office on, I remember he had a distinctive building, 212 Pacific Avenue in the Inlet. And then later he moved to Ventnor, and Chuck grew up in Ventnor, even though the father had the office in the Inlet. But anyway, both John O'Neill and Chuck Stern made their careers with the FBI. And by coincidence, both of these Atlantic City natives were assigned to investigate the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. And in 1993, you had this group. Nobody knew who they were at the time. They were radical Wahhabi followers of the Blind Sheikh, who had a mosque in Brooklyn. And at first, nobody had any idea who these people were, except we were lucky that they were stupid. And how were they stupid? After they rented a Ryder truck in New Jersey, stuffed it with explosives, and detonated it in the garage of the World Trade Center in 1993, and killed, I forget what they killed, 6 or 9 people. After they blew up the truck, they went back to the truck rental agency to try to get back the $400 deposit on their rental truck. And the investigators were able to identify the rental truck in the wreckage by the vehicle identification number. I forget on the tailpipe. So basically, these followers of the blind sheik in Brooklyn were all identified, and they were all tied to the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that same bunch of Wahhabi, Salafi, jihadi cult. And we learned every detail of who they were, and we learned every detail of how much money they were getting from the Saudi government. And this is back in 1993, 1994, 1996. But the key to the investigation was what Chuck Stern did. Chuck Stern was then sent to Pakistan to arrest one of the ringleaders of this 1993 attempt, and he was handcuffed to this terrorist for like a 14-hour flight back from Pakistan to New York. And Chuck Stern did amazing police work and won the confidence of this particular terrorist, who gave him every detail, not only about why they blew up the World Trade Center in the first place, because they believed it was the center of the Zionist Jewish headquarter elite that was running the world, but he also went into detail of how they were disappointed that they did the calculation wrong on the explosives. You see, that when they put the truck under the World Trade Center, they expected one tower to topple into the other and to kill 20,000 people. But the terrorists confessed that we made a mistake in the calculations, so went into detail about how they had engineers in Germany doing the calculations, and he pointed out how next time they were going to do the job the way they intended. And after that happened, these 2 men from Atlantic City, John O'Neill and Chuck Stern, would frantically go to everyone in the FBI and the law enforcement who would listen to warn of who these Wahhabi terrorists were and what their plans were for the second attack on the World Trade Center, and they were all totally ignored until after it happened. So that's the tragedy, but it's also the truth. And it's amazing how many major political issues in America and around the world seem to have an Atlantic City connection. Well, it looks like we're out of time. How much time do I have? I have 30 seconds, just enough to say, if you want to see the other 12 topics I wanted to talk about but didn't get to, they're posted at libertyandprosperity.com. If you like our message, please donate on our website or with a check to our Summers Point office. And please share our stuff. Please subscribe to our newsletter. Please meet us for breakfast any Saturday morning at Sal's Cafe in Summers Point, 9:30 to 10:30. Thank you.
The preceding program was paid for and presented by John DeMasi.